And live from Brussels, it's ZN Live. And today I'm very excited to have Colm Clarke as our guest. Colm is an experienced person in the world of associations, of consulting communication with over 20 years experience. He's now the partner consultant at Exemplar Management. I met with him in Geneva not long ago at an Association World Conference, which was fascinating and raised a number of topics. And I think one of the big questions that I find very interesting and relevant for the people that we're working with is, what happens to associations and events in the post-COVID world? We had a moment when everything went online, of course, due to necessity. Then we went to hybrid. And I think people don't really know where we're landing. So what is your experience of where we are now and where we're heading into next year?
Well, thanks, Phil, for the invite. I mean, I think what we've seen, and we've been through some hard times in the association space, like everyone has. But the pandemic, it proved the value of the communities that associations have built. It proved the value of those connections, and not just professional, but also personal. People having those support networks, people having qualified peers that they could reach out to and converse with on very challenging, very new, very uncertain issues that they were facing. So there were a lot of, let's say, a huge amount of upheaval as regards, for example, business models and value propositions, and how do you reach people when you can't physically meet, et cetera, et cetera. But, I think our view on this is that, by and large, it has really strengthened almost the value proposition that a lot of associations have. In saying that, of course, there's been lots of adaptation and very accelerated innovation about the way people meet, the way people communicate, the way people get together. And you mentioned, going from fully virtual because we had no choice, going to hybrid. I think now what we generally see, and I think that's the kind of the anecdotal evidence is there, that there's quite a backlash against hybrid in a lot of cases, because it's extremely complex for organizations and very costly. So unless you really have, for example, very, very large events that can support, essentially running two events in parallel at the same time, with all the equivalent cost and staffing that goes into that, we're seeing a lot of organizations now saying, okay, we have to keep virtual. We need to provide that platform. We need to be there 24/7. But really, when we do get together, we focus, the real focus is on the people in the room, and we don't, in a way, I'll say, bother. We don't try to serve a remote audience, because the people in the room who've taken the time to be there, they are our prime concern during those events.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. I saw, there's been a very, as you said, strong backlash post hybrid, back to in the room. However, I think people now realize that they can have a lot more online meetings, maybe on a smaller scale, maybe in a more specific environment. But also sometimes, they see that you can reach far more people with online. And I think the question is, how do you mix the technology with the need for this face-to-face interaction to build deeper connections and to build community? Because I think what we're really seeing is associations are really networks and communities. They're not formal organizations. Now, what we see, and something we've always advocated for, is that your event is a moment in your communication. And it's a moment when you can create content. So as you said, I think hybrid, where you stream the event, is quite difficult and expensive, and it's worth doing in certain cases. But I think what people often forget is that you have great content that can be created in that event: video interviews, clips, tweets, social media content. And I feel that that's often, that to me is the opportunity that we try to help our clients with. And where you got so many good people that you can actually kind of get 2-minute interviews and things like that. How open, how adapted do you think the association world is to this new change, and how frequently are they doing that in your experience?
I think there's a huge difference depending on the organizations, depending on their scale, their maturity in a way, when it comes to their content strategies, and obviously resources. because what you're describing, I think, makes a huge amount of sense. The challenge is it takes a huge amount of resources to do it well. If you think about as a speaker, when you're up there live in the room, the little glitches, the little hesitations, nobody really pays any attention to them. You've got that kind of body language connection that makes things feel natural. But whenever you put a camera in front of somebody, all of a sudden, any twitch, any stumble, and they don't feel comfortable or they want to redo it. So I think this when you move from live to recording and recording, I think there's a lot of details that come into play then you don't really pay attention when you're in the room. So that's one challenge. And the other thing is, taking a step back, actually, the thing is, I think there's a huge opportunity because there's so much content created. We see it. It's been I've long felt it in a way a shame, because we're at events, you see what's been shared, you see the exchange that have been had, and you realize that it's gone off into the air. Okay, it's carried around in the memories and the hearts and souls of the people who were there, but there's all of this that kind of is off into the air, maybe never seen again. So in a way, capturing that organizations can do it effectively, I think it's a huge value, especially when they're trying to feed this year-round cycle of top quality content. If we think about it from what we see in our association clients and in the space more generally, is associations are they are really, really top quality content producers in a lot of ways. But of course, they are challenged in being able to cut through the noise, because there's just so much out there. Everybody is producing content these days. The question, of course, is whether or not associations can keep up and cut through the noise that's out there.
Okay, we had a little distortion on the sound there. That's why I was posting it. So we'll just check if it's the same answer for my team. But you were just saying that you needed to cut through the noise. We could hear what you're saying with a slightly Terminator kind of twang. Now I think we're back. So it's all good.
I just switched to the other mic on the.
Yeah, this is good. You're back, so no problem. So I think what you're saying is very interesting, and this idea that we have so much content during an event, and often if it's like a 2-day event, you have literally hours of presentations, discussions, and all that, and as you said, they disappear after. And I think that there are ways to use that content and turn it into conversations that are actually not necessarily as expensive as people think. And for example, one of the things that is now possible is that you can record a speech. Forget about the live streaming, but you could record it. You could do a very low-cost video recording, but then you could turn that recording into a text, because you have AI that does a very good job at turning that into a text, which could then be turned into a summary, and then that could be posted on LinkedIn or on X. And then for me, what's really important is this idea of a before, during, and after of an event. So before you begin the conversation by asking questions online, then you have the event, and then you have the follow-up discussions during the event. You saw that in Geneva, I posted a video on my, I did a 3-minute summary of what I took away, and that created another wave of discussions after. So what are your thoughts on how you can use AI and other new technologies to perhaps extend the impact of an event?
Yeah, the examples you gave, I think, are the ones that we are particularly interested in. The ability to, I transcribe. We're already using that. For example, we do consulting projects where we interview volunteer leaders and board members. If we record those calls, we can have teams transcribe them, and you've got a quick reference, which is, of course, much faster to review again, and you don't have to watch a 45-minute conversation back to pick out, okay, that's what that person said that we knew was a really key point there. So those tools are, I think, extremely useful. But going beyond that, the ability to be able to have those things transcribed, but also timestamped, so that if you want to make highlights clips and go back and say, I remember the keynote had that brilliant one-liner, but it was somewhere around the 27-minute mark. Having someone having being able to pinpoint that, and then you kind of you can pull those highlights reads together very, very quickly. That I think will be really exciting. And then the other, there's the other things which are already there, right? About providing more personalized content based on what people have indicated are their interests, and all of those things that are kind of running in the background. So I think when we're talking about AI as it relates to associations and events right now, it's a kind of it's a strange moment, because ChatGPT, for example, has taken it's the focus, or all the generative stuff is really the focus. But a lot of the tools that will be most valuable to us are probably the less flashy ones. They're things that will help us do some of the kind of what would be really tedious manual work, and I can take care of that. I think those will be extremely exciting, and hopefully then free up the time so that we can do the more higher value work, or more value judgment work. For example, saying that's a great highlight segment, let's use that one. But I have more time to do that now, because I'm reading the transcript that was produced in 30 seconds instead of me sitting down watching a 30+ minute keynote speech and trying to find where that part of the where that comment was made.
Yeah, and I think those tools will help us to get better quality content and more relevant content out of these events. And a lot of people are worried about AI creating misinformation and flooding LinkedIn with generic posts. But I think what they're missing is that it's also going to help people to get what they want and what they're interested in much faster. Because it's not, it's a bit like when people said, information overload, the internet is going to overwhelm us all, and we can't handle the amount of information. I always think it's like saying you go into a library and you're overwhelmed by the amount of books that there are on it. No, you just pick one, open it, and start reading. And I think with AI and events, it allows you to say, okay, let's put all the stuff that we said about sustainability in an article with a clip. Let's put it online. Let's allow people to go back to that discussion so they can actually really focus and drill deeper into where they're interested in and what they want to learn about. But I want to come back to the future of events. We had the backlash against hybrid, a lot of big events in Brussels. There's also a quasi-recession in the air. I don't think we've defined it as a recession yet, but the media certainly keeps talking about it. So do you see the coming year, with, of course, the election, a lot of big issues coming up to the forefront, do you see more events back to more traditional things, or do you predict a kind of change in the nature and structure of these events?
I mean, what we advocate for is that, we are firm believers in the value of in-person events, because we think there is no other way to create the atmosphere, to have the exchanges, and to have the positive experience that you get at those events. So we are firm believers in that. Saying that, the need to demonstrate value for time invested is greater than ever. So there is a need to constantly create better and better events. Now that depends a little bit on the sector. It depends on the nature of the event. Most of the events we run for our clients, they're events where people are paying to attend, or members will pay. There will be an investment, a financial investment plus the time investment. So it's a very, let's say, we're acutely aware of the need to be able to basically justify budget, because it's not just an invite only, come along, if you don't like it, you can, have the lunch and then leave. It's not that type of event model that we work in most of the time. So, we are always trying to create better, more engaging sessions, better briefed speakers, more challenging sessions, put people in front of, or put people, give them access to people that they wouldn't normally hear, or that they wouldn't normally search for. We think that's very much our job when it comes to developing good program content, is making sure that there's something in there that is not what they're expecting, and maybe from somebody outside their usual sphere, outside their usual bubble, who's going to challenge their assumptions that they that they kind of naturally carry around with them, because everybody, we work in a lot of different sectors, a lot of different types of people, but what I see is that most professionals have their kind of safe zones, they have their core competencies, they have the areas that they're very, very happy to talk about for a long, long time. And then there's all these things in the fringes that make them really uncomfortable. And that's our job, I think, as event creators, to make sure they get the right amount of discomfort at events, because that's where the learning happens. That's where you really help them, you know, be a better professional, or adapt to an upcoming change, or be, you know, able to showcase their value better. You know, when you're talking about I want to come back to your, you know, your library example there, because when it comes back to communications, you know, a lot of people struggle to convey the value of what they're doing, and they struggle maybe to place themselves in very complex, like matrix style organizations, where everyone is having to kind of prove themselves to everyone else all the time. And if you're not a great communicator, you can get lost in the noise. So that's one thing that we really try to help people across different professions make sure that they are as best placed to be able to communicate with people around them in their organizations who don't necessarily do the same job as they do. So that's one thing we do a lot of. Another thing is, like I said, coming back to your library analogy there, it's a nice one, but I would push it back on it a little bit, because what we see in the events and the association space is, we see now, yes, you're in the library. The difference is, in the library, you walk in and it's nice and quiet and you get to browse at your own pace. What we see today is, imagine you go into a library, but 100 people are flinging books at you all the time and running up to you and saying, hey, read this first. No, read me, mine's better. And I think that's a bit the situation that we're in now, where people are, they have the right to choose, but because of the way the platforms operate, because of the way those business models operate, we're constantly getting blasted, and it's the push of information towards us that makes it difficult. You know, it becomes an active process to filter all those things. And if you come back to the role of associations in their events, I think the association as a filter, as a curator, as a quality stamp, that's a huge value, because that's saying, listen, you know, don't worry, I will take you through the library. I'll show you which books you need to read, because you've told me what you want to achieve. And that's, I think, if associations can do that and keep doing that and keep getting better at doing that, then they and their events have a bright future.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good point. You know, helping with the filtering and selection of information. Indeed. Now, I believe actually that for young people today who are starting their career, one of the core skills they need is to learn to filter the noise that they get on social media and on the internet. And that means, you know, setting your notifications in a way that doesn't interrupt you, and where you are much more selective of what information you want to be reading and seeing and interacting with. And I think that that's the skill that allows you to not be overwhelmed, but to actually be in control of the information that comes in. From your perspective, when young people, like some of the people watching this, ask you, you know, what is your advice to people starting in the association and events world? What are the skills they really need to focus on, according to you?
I think it's very much a people business. So I think, you know, that's first and foremost. If you're in the association and you're in the events world, you're going to be in front of people. You're going to be talking to people. It's what I found, going back quite a few years now. One of the things I really liked about the association world and getting involved in it was, at a relatively young age, you get to meet an enormous amount of extremely interesting, extremely well qualified. You get bona fide experts, and you get access to them directly in a way that I'd never got in another type of job. So I think in the association of events, but that's a huge opportunity for young professionals to be in front of, to get to know, to work with people who are really, really well advanced and really, you know, at the pinnacles of their careers, because, you know, those people will be part of your professional network, and perhaps for years to come. You never know where that goes. That's one thing. But it is not easy, of course, to just jump in and be around that type of audience. So I think, you know, people being taking the time to listen, taking the time to kind of learn how to read the room, taking the time to understand, what is a constructive criticism and what is just, pointing out things that aren't good. I think that was for me, that was one of the milestones. I think that there was a watershed moment for me when I realized, okay, I'm very good at pointing out problems, but unless I can follow that up immediately with and here's what I think we should do, or it would be better if we did this instead, then that's when you start to really make a difference. So I think having that always being disciplined to know, okay, I don't like this, but I have to come with a recommendation. I think that's a really good kind of default setting to have. And then, also because we've got, I guess, imagine a communications audience here. I think when we think about communications, it's the way things are now in the digital space, it's incredibly measurable. There are metrics for everything and coming from all directions. So what I think from a communications view, especially as it relates to events, is not to lose sight of what is the actual end results you're trying to achieve. Because if you think as a communicator, well, I got 100 likes on my post, job done, happy days.
Mm.
Well, if that, for example, in our case, if we get 100 likes on a social post about a speaker, that's really nice. If we don't get registrations as a result of it, we still have not achieved our goal. So I think for people who want to communicate in the events and association space, I think being aware that there's the communications goals, communications metrics may or may not translate into actual results. That's something I think we have to be, always mindful of, and then in a way humble about, because it's easy to get excited when things, take off on when a post takes off on LinkedIn. But like I said, part of that is going to make a difference, but it might just be gone tomorrow, and it doesn't matter 30 seconds later.
Yeah, so I think that's really about connecting with people and people in the room. The second point is, I would say, proactive problem solvers. So looking for how to solve the issues that you've identified, and finally focusing on results, which of course is not just the registration. It's also what was the point of having the people in the room in the first place. So what did we seek to accomplish from the event or from the communication, which is often shaping behavior, shaping, influencing an agenda, or educating people. Now we have time for some recommendations. So you had a couple of books you wanted to recommend. So let's start.
I do actually, I've even got them here, physical
Excellent.
copies. So with all of the, let's say, all of the AI hype at the moment, a couple of things that I have enjoyed. One of them is this Yuval Noah Harari, pretty well-known person, but this book was 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. It's actually written in 2018. So it's kind of the AI hype we're seeing now, but the big picture societal questions that he poses, I think they're all extremely relevant, because this type of discussions now we're having about the future of work, the nature of work, what will be valued and not. I think he really frames things and puts challenges to us in a really good way. And the other thing is that's the nonfiction. Then from a fiction point of view, because Yuval there is really good at asking the questions, but without, of course, knowing where he might lead. There's this guy, Ian M. Banks, who is one of my favorite authors. Unfortunately, he passed away about 10 years ago, but he wrote a series of science fiction books where the focus was on what he called the culture, but this was essentially a humanoid culture where they had given over the organization and the running of their society to super sophisticated AIs. Mm-hmm. So if you're pairing Yuval's kind of, here's the questions we have to pose as society, and with this is kind of one vision of where things could potentially lead. Now we're talking long time into the future, but where AIs are sentient, where they are considered persons, in legal persons with rights just the same as organic beings, and so on. So it's a fascinating read. There's a lot of what he goes into is really examining what it means to be human, what is the nature of society in that kind of age of technology, or perfect technology, and also things like this is a post-scarcity society. There's they've moved beyond money, for example. So Yuval kind of poses those questions: what's going to happen? Because in where we live right now, of course, money is an intrinsic part of everything that we do. Money is an intrinsic part of the AI discussion. How do people monetize? What are the business models going to look like? And then you've got One Vision where they've moved far beyond that. So that's some summer reading if you want to dig into the AI topic from a few perspectives.
Absolutely fascinating. I think Ian Banks is actually one of Elon Musk's favorite authors, but I've read Consider Phlebas, and very interesting journey. And I think sci-fi is great to make us think about things that are ahead of us, but with the AI, how it's moving now, I think it's catching up. And so the questions we thought would be 100 years in the future might be 5 or 10 years in the future. So I think we need to really think about what it's going to look like. Yuval is fantastic, and I think if you like that, you should read *Sapiens* and *Homo Deus*. Of course, his deeper dive into some of these questions, but fantastic read. He's talking a lot right now on podcasts left, right, and center. There's a bit of a doom and gloom message coming out of Yuval. I think it's kind of like, what is going to happen to society, which I think are good questions to ask. But I also think that it's important to look at the opportunities in the short term whilst having the discussion about the guardrails that we need to put around this. But that's fantastic advice. I want to give a shout out to the Good Lobby, which is actually a Brussels-based organization that's looking at how lobbying can be improved and how to bring more transparency to conversations and helping to improve the profession in some way. So interesting initiative. And my shout out in terms of podcast is actually another AI discussion with the founder of Stability AI. This is actually Emad Mostake, who discusses this in quite some detail. And again, I think it's very interesting now to listen to people who are effectively looking at all these topics and trying to imagine that future as conversations from Yuval to all these people. So I think now is the time to do that. So I think that's all we have time for. Have a fantastic weekend. If you're in Brussels, well, let's hope that the weather improves slightly, but at least we're not in a heat wave. So I guess that's the upside. And we will see you online if we don't see you at an event first. So have a fantastic weekend. Bye now.
Thanks a lot, Bill. Bye-bye.